Welcome to the Conflict Zone, a channel dedicated to informing about major conflict points around the world.
In this video, we examine the recent vow from Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who promised a military response to the Israeli strike on October 26th. This attack from Israel was, in turn, retaliation for an Iranian assault. The ongoing chain of strikes and counterstrikes raises the question of whether this signals an impending open war in the Middle East.
Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell to stay updated with all our latest news.
The latest Iran-Israel confrontation follows a series of deliberate Israeli operations. Over the past few weeks, Israel has been linked to the targeted assassinations of key anti-Israel figures: Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas, Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, and Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander Abbas Nilfarushan. These events led Iran to launch missiles into Israel, escalating tensions significantly. In response, Israel conducted a series of early morning, precisely aimed airstrikes on October 26, hitting military installations within Iran's borders. Importantly, Israeli strikes did not target Iran's nuclear or oil infrastructures, its strategic assets. This choice showed Israel's intent to impact Iran's military capabilities without provoking an uncontrollable escalation. By targeting missile factories and air defense systems, Israel demonstrated its ability to respond strongly without crossing certain tacit boundaries that could otherwise escalate into full-scale war. Iran reported the resulting damage as minimal, but declared that it was compelled to defend itself against such acts of aggression. Analysts point out that terms like obligation and right reveal Iran's complex position, trying to maintain an image of strength for its own people while holding back from a response that might cause wider escalation. This careful wording from Iran might indicate a desire to avoid expanding the conflict, despite its frustrations. The United States has played a significant role in pressing Israel to exercise restraint and respond in proportion to avoid further instability in the Middle East. The U.S. aims to prevent its ally from engaging in a conflict that could destabilize the region and involve Iran's allies in places like Iraq and Lebanon. Additionally, the recent increase in U.S. military presence in the area has acted as a deterrent against Iranian action. The United Kingdom and other Western nations have also voiced concerns over a potential cycle of retaliations, noting that escalations in the Middle East threaten regional stability and global trade, particularly given Iran's control over the strategic Strait of Hormuz, a critical oil transport route. Western allies are thus pushing both sides to seek diplomatic solutions, as they see regional stability as a global priority. Nonetheless, the effectiveness of these diplomatic pressures is uncertain, given the long history of conflicts in the region. Iran's defiance toward foreign influence is evident in both its actions and rhetoric. The Iranian government is caught between demonstrating power to its domestic audience and managing international expectations. How Iran balances these pressures will influence not only its next steps with Israel, but also its broader diplomatic relationships with global powers such as the US, the European Union, and even Russia. This context highlights Iran's central role in Middle Eastern geopolitics, especially as it continues to back anti-Israel proxies in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. This cycle of conflict resembles a war of retaliation, where both sides calibrate their responses to avoid an all-out confrontation. Years of exchanges and retaliation have established an unspoken understanding between Israel and Iran over which targets are acceptable and which would dangerously escalate the situation. Israel's avoidance of Iran's nuclear and oil sites serves as a clear example of this strategic restraint. Both countries recognize that a large-scale escalation could rapidly spiral out of control, drawing in allies and turning the Middle East into a severe conflict zone. The Iranian government has announced plans for a proportional response, but the specifics remain uncertain. Some experts suggest Iran may retaliate indirectly, perhaps through allies like Hezbollah in Lebanon or militias in Iraq, targeting Israeli or U.S. interests across the region. Such an approach would allow Iran to respond without directly engaging Israeli territory, which could prevent a greater escalation that might result in harsher reprisals on its own soil. However, this strategy still poses risks, potentially involving other regional players like Saudi Arabia and even Russia, which has its own interests in regional stability. Looking ahead, diplomatic options for both sides are limited. But international pressure to avoid escalation could drive indirect negotiations. The upcoming U.S. presidential election is another factor that could reshape American Middle East policy. Should a less Israel-centric administration come into office, U.S. support for Israeli preventive and deterrent actions might shift. Iran, meanwhile, is watching this scenario closely, as a White House change could alter its perception of threats and influence its future actions. The world is now watching Iran's next move, as a poorly calculated response could ignite a dangerous cycle of attacks and counterattacks, potentially leading the region into a broader conflict.
If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, make sure to do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with the latest news. See you in the next video.